All right. Hello, hello, hello.
Hello.
I am I am joined here today by Will. He is one of our editors for the fanfic. Um, and Will pointed me to something that I'd never seen before, and I don't think anybody in the fandom has. There's never been anyone that's talked about this little bit of fiction or poetry. It's poetry fiction, but
Yeah.
um, but this we're going to be talking about this poem called "The Generations of Men" by Robert Frost. And the thing about Robert Frost is we know that George R. R. Martin is a fan of Robert Frost. Um, a Song of Ice and Fire is named for Robert Frost's poem "Fire and Ice." Additionally, he had another screenplay for an episode of, I think it was The Outer Limits, called The Road Not Taken, which is about a person who is experiencing two moments of his life had he made a different choice regarding Vietnam way back in the day. And then so that's two positive things. And then there's this idea that the wall is probably somewhat a reference to the Mending Wall, which is a third Robert Frost poem. But Will brought this to my attention, this poem called Generations of Men, which, if it's not related to A Song of Ice and Fire, it's a lot of fucking coincidences.
Yeah.
How did you stumble? Were you reading Frost poetry? I know that
Y-
you're a big reader.
Yeah. I mean, I just took the collection out the library and was working my way through. There was no intent to like investigate a George R. R. Martin influence or reference. I just came across this poem with Starks, and it's an incestuous flirtation among these people named Stark. And I was like, how has no one come across this before? Like, of course,
Right.
there has to be some
I would
connection
say
here.
that most fans assume that um that the series is based on, the War of the Roses very loosely. So a lot of people see
Hmm.
York and Lancaster and either think that like Stark is some sort of reference to York, and or maybe a reference to Tony Stark because George R. R. Martin was a comic book fan. But honestly,
Okay.
I don't think it's a reference to Tony Stark because Tony
Nor do
Stark
I.
was a B-list superhero before Robert Downey Jr. Like no one really you're talking there's like S tier comics, yeah, especially in the 70s, 60s and 70s, and it was Spider-Man. And X-Men started to get some traction back then, but didn't really dominate until the 80s and 90s. But nonetheless, those are like the S tiers, like X-Men, Spider-Man. And then you have like Fantastic Four, that's like A tier. And then you kind of go down, you get to the Avengers. Like the Avengers were never that big of a deal. No one really cares about Tony Stark that much.
Right, and what's the connection in terms of story or personality? Like,
None.
not so
None.
much. Whereas here, there's plenty of connection.
Right. So here we have this poem about in a general sense, it's about two Starks who are meeting for a family reunion, and they're distant cousins, and they begin to flirt. Right. This is just, more or less the poem. It's rather
Yeah,
long.
yeah.
Um, but let's go through it, like some of it real quick. We'll see if we get to read the whole thing. Um,
Okay.
a governor was proclaimed this time when all who would come seeking in New Hampshire, ancestral memories might come together, and those of the name Stark gathered in Bow. Bow, I imagine, is the name of the town.
Yeah.
Um, a rock-strewn town where farming has fallen off and sprout lands flourish where the axe has gone. Someone had literally run to earth in an old cellar hole in a byroad, the origin of all the family there. Thence they were sprung, so numerous a tribe that now not all the houses left in town made shift to shelter them without the help of here and there tent and grove and orchard. They were at bow, but that was not enough. Nothing would do, but they must fix a day to stand together on the crater's verge. Um,
So not a literal crater. They're just looking into. this wrecked basement, or what's left of the basement of this house. This is a
Oh,
metaphorical crater.
I see. I see. So this house is a wreck from. It's an old house, and it's there's not much left
Oh
of
yeah,
it.
all that's left of this villa or whatever it is the remains of the cellar, kind of exposed now because the house itself is gone.
Gotcha.
And metaphorically, it's a crater that they arrived on, like comet as a Vulcan, etc.
Like as if they
Of
came
course,
from
that
outer
must be there.
space and like landed in this
Yes,
explosion kind of thing. I see.
yeah.
Um, that turned them on the world and try to fathom the past and get some strangeness out of it. But rain spoiled all. The day began uncertain, with clouds trailing and moments of rain that misled. The young folk held some hope out to each other. 'Tis well towards noon, when the storm settled down, with a swish in the grass. What if the others are there? I mean, that's probably not the others, but nonetheless, what if the
It
others
is
are
funny.
there? They said,
They're
it isn't
finally
going to
here.
rain. Only one from a farm not far away strolled thither, not expecting he would find anyone else, but out of idleness, one and one other, yes, and there were two. The second round of the curving hillside road was a girl, and she halted some way off. To I'm gonna go horrible in the pronunciation here. To
Reconnoiter.
reconnoiter, and then made up her mind, at least to pass by and see who he was, and perhaps hear some word about the weather. This was some Stark she didn't know. He nodded. No feet today, he said. It looks that way. She
A pun
swept the
on no
heavens.
fate.
What's that? Oh, fate today? No fate today?
Yeah, no fate in the world. Yeah, who knows?
Oh, interesting spelling.
Yeah,
She what's the definition of this fate?
like a
FET.
celebration or
Oh,
right,
really?
a feast
Oh, okay, okay.
party.
See, these people that do better on the SAT. Than me.
It's my job to know.
She swept the heavens, turned on her heel. Only idled down. I idled down. Provisions there had been for such a meeting of stranger cousins in a family tree. So here these two cousins are flirting, um, which is just a weird. By the way, what a weird topic for a poem. Like to be
Yes,
like family reunion and two people flirting. I don't know. There's kind of this. I mean, he wasn't old at the time of this, but it just seems like it's this weird obsession of like old men of a certain time. Um, but drawn on a sort of passport with the branch of the one bearing it done in detail, some zealous one's laborious device. She made a sudden movement toward her bodice, as as one who clasps her heart. They laughed together. Stark, he inquired. No matter for the proof. Yes, Stark. And you? I'm Stark. He drew his passport. You know we might not be, and you know we might not be and still be cousins. The town is full of chases, lows, and Baileys. Um, yeah, this line, of course, like brings up. I immediately think of Duskendale, where Brienne like goes to Duskendale and starts talking about how like the Darklands are gone, but the
hmm.
Darks and the Dargoods and the Dars all
They're not
have,
really gone.
yeah, that they're still there, right? And this is kind of the same idea that they're Starks, but they're hidden Starks, right? Like there's Chases, Lows, and Baileys, but they're all Starks.
Hmm.
Um, all claiming some priority of Starkness. My mother was a Lane, yet might have married anyone upon the earth and still her children. Um, but yeah, certainly this idea in Ice and Fire that um, your surname may be one thing, but you can take on attributes of your mother's side. Obviously, like
Yeah,
the biggest joke is of course Joffrey Baratheon, but We hear of like Bran having flint blood and being able to climb. Um, Shireen having Florent ears, things like this. I mean,
Mhm.
obviously Bran and Robb and Sansa having Tully red hair and things like that.
I have to think of your whole dragon seed idea where it's
Yeah,
or the genealogy of dragons, etc. video where it's not really the father, the patrilineal line that matters, even though that's where the name is. What matters is the this other chromosome. So the women are the
right.
ones you
I
need to be
mean,
paying
yeah,
attention
if
to.
you go with the Dragon X, that it's all the females. the
Yeah, so the
my
name doesn't matter.
my unproven theory, but still, yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
But
it's Targaryens hiding in plain sight under different names, which is exactly what they're talking about.
yeah, um, would have been Starks and doubtless here today. You riddle with your genealogy like a viola. I don't
12th
follow
night.
you. I only mean my mother was a Stark several times over, and by marrying father, no more than brought us back into the name. Um, One ought not to be thrown into confusion by a plain statement of relationship, but I own what you may make what but I own what you say makes my head spin. You take my card. You seem so good at such things. It's funny is that she's actually claiming to be more Stark than he is,
Mm-hmm.
even though his name is Stark. She's
Well, they're
claiming
both
she's
Stark.
yeah. She claims that I'm not only a Stark because my mother is, but we were married in several times over.
Yeah, and in a moment she'll show that she has 3 different cards for the different branches of Stark that she's in, whereas he only has the one because he's only a single branch.
Right. So even though her name isn't Stark, she's more Stark than he.
No, it is though. They're because she's a Stark because her father was a Stark.
Oh, I'm
It's just that
sorry.
her mother didn't have the name, though she was a Stark,
Oh,
but
I
then
see. I
married
see.
back into the name. So they're both Starks now, but she's a triple Stark and he's
She's a
only a single
triple
Stark.
Stark. Okay. I misunderstood. So
Yeah,
yes, so she not only has she has the Stark name and more Starks past that. Okay.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I'm more Stark than you.
And it can be
And see if
tricky
you can
following who's talking here. But
yeah, it's hard. And see if you can reckon our cousinship. Why not take seats here on the cellar wall and dangle feet among raspberry vines under the shelter of the family tree? Just so. I love just so. By the way, um, in your entire life, have you ever used the word just so? Ever used the phrase just so?
in conversation,
Yeah,
uh, I don't think so.
because obviously it's so ice and fire.
Have I
Um,
ever said indeed
indeed,
while talking? It would be
I've
about
probably
the
used
same.
indeed, but I mean maybe that's just a coincidence. But just so, so very Esos, I guess. That ought to be enough protection. Not from the rain. I think it's going to rain. It's raining. No, it's misting. Let's be fair. So they're just like they're arguing to flirt. There's
Yes,
nothing. Yeah,
making little
like
meaningless jabs.
yeah. Does the rain seem to you to cool the eyes? The situation was like this. The road um, bowed outward, bowed outward on the mountain halfway up, and disappeared and ended not far off. No one went home that way. The only house beyond where they were was a shattered seed pod, and below roared a brook hidden in the trees, the sound of which was silence of this place. And he sat listening to till she gave judgment. On father's side, it seems, where, let me see, don't be too technical. You have 3 cards, 4 cards, 1 yours, 3 mine, 1 for each branch of the Stark family I'm a member of. Do you know a person so related to herself? I'm supposed to be mad. I may be mad.
Yeah, so
That
the idea that incest leads to madness, which is something that, of course, we see with the Targs.
right. What's funny about incest leading to madness is they talk about it in Ice and Fire, but I never thought of it as like a real world thing. Like, yes, incest leads to like genetic disorders and being crazy, and I've heard people having three eyes or whatever, or having mental retardation. All sorts of things
Mhm.
are associated with incest, but I'd never go to like insanity as the first thing. Though they do in Ice and Fire, and they do in this poem,
Yes.
which is just kind of a funny thing. Like it's not the first. Like I would more think of like people being an albino from like recessive genes and incest, or something like that, than insanity. But that struck me pretty hard. You look so, sitting out here in the rain, studying genealogy with me. See, just like us with Dragon X genes, we're just studying
Mhm.
genealogy.
Crazy.
You never saw before, and what we will come to with all this pride of ancestry, we Yankees. Yeah, it's funny to talk about like the pride of ancestry, the sort of like odd nationalism of it, or the right word of it.
Right, and something you've touched on, that people rooting for one house over another are kind of missing
Yeah.
the points of Ice and Fire. Yeah, this is all stupid. You shouldn't have this like one house ought to win. The whole system is bad. Yada yada, which is just what he's saying here.
Okay,
Pride
and
of ancestry isn't useful.
now we're getting to the juicy parts here. By the way, them hanging over a cellar, even though it's like an open cellar, I somehow think of the Crypts of Winterfell.
Well, it's the cellar underneath the ancestral home of the Starks. So
Right,
the Crypts of
right. Like this
Winterfell,
is
sure.
they're sitting here among a because the house they're at is the original Stark house, right?
Yeah.
So this is the first keep, the first house, and so they're sitting over the cellar, essentially the Crypts of Winterfell. I think we're all mad. Tell me why we're here, drawn into this town about this cellar hole. Like wild geese on a lake before a storm. What do you see in such a hole, I wonder? All right, now this is juicy. This is where it gets crazy. The Indians had a myth of Chickamaustock, which means the 7 caves that we came out of. This is the pit which the Starks were digged. So
the long night.
right. So we're talking here that she's saying the Starks started from this cellar, this underground dwelling, and then came out into the world. And I mean, I'm not the only person that talked about like people going underground during the long night. People thought of the crypts, and we have these stories of like Bale the Bard and like people living, the Starks living subterranean, like, in a subterranean dwelling for long periods of time and then like coming out. You mentioned to me before about the 7 caves. Like, is the 7 kingdoms the 7 caves? Like, does each kingdom have some sort of bomb shelter aspect to it?
That's absolutely the case in Dying of the Light, right? There's a sort of like tribe or
each hold
kingdom.
Fast had a
each hold fast. That's the word he uses. That has their own cave that they all went into, and they had the incest problem, and they had the genetic problems, and they came back out, and that had to do with how they treated women. It's all kind of exactly the same as the situation in Westeros.
I mean, you could certainly say that with the Starks, they could all live in the crypts during the long night, and with the Westerlands, you could say they lived in Casterly Rock, and the Eyrie is very similar. It's also a mountain carved out. With Dorne, one could say that maybe the Sand Ship is a giant bomb shelter. It might not be subterranean, though we hear of caves, the caves that they hide in whenever they were fighting dragons. So they do have caves there.
Yes.
We don't know enough of the Reach or the Stormlands to say much about it, though Arianne does find herself in those caves in the Stormlands.
Hmm.
In the Riverlands, I suppose there's some hollow hills that people could go in, like where the Brotherhood Without Banners are.
Right, but
But
just to summarize for those who aren't like readily familiar with your videos on this, the idea is that there was this apocalyptic event caused by science or magic. You know, it could be some kind of nuclear fallout situation, which drove everyone underground, and that's what is referred to in legend as the Long Night, and it corresponds to these caves that are underneath every single of the seven kingdoms. And so this reference here about seven caves everyone came out of, and this is the one that the Starks were in, much like the caves, the hole under Winterfell, is
yeah,
suggesting this is a lot, and the incest thing happening at the same time. It's
right.
suggestive of all this stuff that we're seeing in Westeros.
Because I mean, even if you're removing Ice and Fire from it, George R. R. Martin's writing repeats the idea of people living underground just a lot. Like there's dark where the tunnels, there's dying of the
Hmm.
light, there's in the House of the Worm, like
Yes. Yeah.
people living underground. I mean, under siege, they're living underground in their bomb shelters for waiting out radiation from the surface and things like this. I
Hmm.
mean, it's a big continuous thing. It's bunker life, or
Yeah.
Fallout.
But not in any of those do we have seven kingdoms with seven caves.
No, no.
This is a really specific call out. And of
Oh,
course, lest we forget, it's the Starks.
it's the Starks. Yes, lest we forget, it is the Starks living in caves beneath the earth, and this is where their entire like lifestyle, like their lineage comes from.
Hmm.
You must be learned. That's what you see in it. And what do you see? Yes. What do I see? First, let me look. I see raspberry vines. Oh, if you're going to use your eyes, just here. What I see, it's a little boy, a pale and dim as a match flame in the sun. He's groping in the cellar after jam. He thinks it's dark and it's flooded with daylight. This is like, I mean, this sounds like dark where the tunnels, like, this like pale person under the earth. Or like what
Yes.
I kind of say about the Carthene of the Valyrians, that they all go pale.
I think
Um,
there's a number of ways to read that. Like she'd be imagining a ghost who thinks it's dark, but because now the cellar is exposed, it's not in the past when it was actually dark. Now it's flooded with daylight because
oh,
of
I
the
see what you're
destruction of the
saying.
villa. Or is she saying the little boy she sees, she's making fun of him, and he's groping as if uncertainly to flirt with her, when in fact, if he were only aware, it's actually broad daylight. It's actually an easy conquest he could be making, but he's
I,
groping uncertainly because he's being awkward. So she could be making fun of him,
I
or it
see.
could
I
be a little bit of
see.
both. Because then he responds by seeing a vision of an old woman in response to her kind of calling him a little boy. So in one sense, they're seeing visions of the past here, but
Right,
also
right.
they are just flirting at the same time.
That's funny. The ghost in Winterfell here. Um,
The pale child.
the pale child. He's nothing. Listen, when I lean like this, I can make out old Grand Sir Stark distinctly, with his pipe in his mouth and his brown jug. Bless you. It isn't Grand Sir Stark, it's Granny. But the pipe's there and smoking, and the jug. She's after cider, the old girl. She's thirsty. Here's hoping she gets her drink and gets out safely. I see.
Yeah.
Tell me
So
about her. Yeah. So
yeah,
he's saying that she was
he's
teasing him and saying that he's a young boy who is not seeing that he could totally get with her, and he kind of responds saying that she's like an old lady who's drunk,
who's thirsty.
who's
Maybe
thirsty.
she's
Oh,
also groping for something sweet, the way she said the boy was.
gotcha. Does she look like me? She should, shouldn't she? You're so many times over descended from her. I see. They're both remembering the past,
Mhm.
but also talking about the present. um, cyclical nature of time or something. I believe she does look like you. Stay the way you are. The nose is just the same. So's the chin. Uh, this is the whole thing about everybody looking like their ancestors.
Yeah.
Making allowance, making due allowance. You poor
And he's contriving an excuse to stare at her
yeah.
for a few seconds here.
You poor dear great 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 granny. See, you get her greatness, right? Don't stint her. Yes, it's important, though you think it isn't. I won't be teased, but see how wet I am. Ooh la la.
Yeah, there's a reason I thought of Liana, or what's her name, the Elia Sand, right? The flirty
Right.
one that Ariane's taking care of. This is a character who is flirtatious
Yes.
and bold. He
She's
even remarks that it's bold of her to be here with a man she doesn't know, studying genealogy together.
Yeah, I mean,
on their own.
considering that this poem was written in like what 1914 or something, 1913.
About yeah,
You know, and he's writing a poem about two people talking and her talking about how wet her vagina is. It's pretty some of these things about like how we imagine the past.
well, you know, it's suggestive. It's not explicit.
Yes.
But yes, they're flirting. Very obviously.
I mean, it may be that see how wet I am 100 years ago was subtle. You know, today, if you say that, it's not subtle at all, but it might have been like, oh, how clever. We don't use that term very much, you know, or whatever.
Whereas now it's constant.
Yeah. Yes, you must go. You must stay here forever. But wait until I give you a hand up. A bead of silver water, more or less, stung on your hair won't hurt your summer looks. I wanted to try something with the noise. That brook raises the empty valley. We have seen visions, now consult the voices, something I must have learned riding in trains. When I was young, I used to roar to set the voices speaking out of it, speaking or singing, and the band music playing. Perhaps you have the art of what I mean. I've never listened in among the sounds that a brook makes in such a wild descent. It ought to give a pure oracle. So now he's talking about prophecy.
Yeah, they've seen visions of the past, or joking visions of the past, and now he's going to give a prophecy. He's going to hear the voices from the past.
It's as though you throw a picture on a screen, and its meaning, and the meaning of it all is out of you. The voices give you what you wish to hear. Strangely, it's anything they wish to give. Then I don't know. I must be strange enough. I wonder if it's not your make-believe. What do you think?
So
yeah.
The dispute there is like, she's saying, well, you know, you're hearing what you want out of the brook, and he's saying, no, the voices are giving it to me. It's from them. It's not out of me, which is something that we talk about in Ice and Fire as well. Like, are people having these visions because they themselves kind of wanted to see it? Is it all biased by them, or is it something
right?
Or
is someone actually sending the visions? Like, is it? That is the ambiguity. Like, if somebody like when Jamie has a dream that he should go save Brienne, like, is it his own guilt?
Yes.
Meaning it's coming from him and he's creating the dream in his head, or is someone sending him a vision from a glass candle or a werewood or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
Like, we don't know.
Here the debate is kind of joking, because obviously he's making it up as they're making up the visions beforehand to kind of tease each other. But in Ice and Fire, this debate is a real thing instead. There are people actually literally putting visions in people's heads and giving them voices in the night and stuff like that.
Yeah. From the sense of our having been together, but why take time of what I'm like to hear? I'll tell you what the voices really say. You will do very well right where you are, a little longer. I mustn't feel too hurried, or I can't give myself to hear the voices. Is this some trance you are withdrawing into? You must be very still. You mustn't talk. I'll hardly breathe. The voices seem to say, I'm waiting. Don't. The voices seem to say, call her Nausicaa, the unafraid of an acquaintance made adventurously. I'll let you say on that on consideration. I don't see very well on how you can help it. You want the truth. I speak, but only by the voices. I see they know I haven't had your name, though what a name should matter between us, I shall suspect. Um,
As in, what should the name Stark matter to keep them from each other? Of course.
yeah, I know. So I know you mentioned to me that like a lot of this flirtation makes you think of Rhaegar and Lyanna, but the fact that it's two Starks, now I'm thinking of like the Arya Jon, like
Yes.
original incest plan.
I think that's where his head was at initially when Arya John was the plan. But I think
Mm,
just based on the personalities here, this isn't really an Arya like character. This
yeah.
is very much an Elia or Lyanna type character, which is
Yes,
why
it's true.
I guess I can get into later. It in so many ways reminds me of Herrenhall and Nausicaa as well. Of course, is this story out of book 6 of the Odyssey, which I don't know if you want me to go into right
Yeah,
now, but in
please.
so many. Oh yeah, so in book 6 of the Odyssey, Athena sends Nausicaa a dream to send her to the beach. She listens to the dream. She goes to the beach. She finds Odysseus, and then her maids run away from this naked man that they've never seen before. But Athena makes her brave. So we have Athena sending a vision to get her where she needs to go, and then making her brave, like we see, say, Sam
Yeah,
being made brave randomly during the election to act out of character.
I
And then
see. I see.
Athena then glamours Odysseus to make him more attractive, to also improve Nausicaa's impression of him. So we have Athena doing all these things that happen in Ice and Fire in this little vignette in the Odyssey. And so suggesting that she's like Nausicaa is saying, well, for one thing, she's bold, she's brave to be out here with a strange man for so long, and she's being praised for this bold character and being compared to someone who's seen visions and been made brave by a goddess. So this is something that I connected to the Lyanna Rhaegar situation because
Hmm.
Odysseus is a king, and so a girl boldly approaching a king and being driven to do it by something she saw in a dream. Earlier, he also compares her to Viola, who's a gender bending hero out of 12th Nights. So if we also see
Oh,
this
I see.
girl
I see.
as like a Viola, then she is someone who's maybe
Right.
dressing up as a man,
I'd
which is the
actually been
story at
like, why is
Harrenhal.
that capitalized? And I was like, oh, it's Viola from Twelfth Night. Yeah, I
Yeah,
was
she
like,
flirts with Olivia and riddles her genealogy because she's pretending to be a man and isn't revealing her real identity. So if this girl in this poem, the Stark girl, is like Viola and Nausicaa, then she is in every way like the gender bending hero of the story at Harrenhal, where she is supposedly dressing up as a man, if you believe that she was the Knight of the Laughing Tree. And
hmm,
then she's boldly approaching a king, Odysseus, because of a dream, a prophecy to maybe, create this, you know, the savior together. It's all of
yes,
these things
yes,
happening at once in ruin, which Harrenhal is a ruin.
right. And although Arya is a little too young to be the flirtatious like Lyanna. I mean, I guess we see
Mm-hmm.
a little bit of it when in the Mercy chapter, in Arya becoming kind of clever and flirtatious, but
And she's a
for
little bit flirtatious
yeah,
with Gendry and gender bending in those bits, but it's
yeah.
yeah, she isn't like the Elia type. She
Right,
wouldn't say, "Look
right.
how wet I am."
Right, yeah. Though everyone, as everyone makes these connections that like, oh, Arya is just supposed to be a young Lyanna, and
hmm
um but the though it's funny, everyone kind of says like Arya is just this young Lyanna, and it's like could anyone imagine Arya like, you know, having a baby and being like, "Please protect my baby." Like it's just so different from but nonetheless
Maybe
there's
relative to the women of Westeros, they're both different enough that they're like
yeah.
each other. But
Um but yeah, now I can see why you know, even though the meeting of Lyanna and Rhaegar at Harrenhal is so much a weird fan creation, it's still like so much kind of fits in this like odd fan creation that we have of what
mhm.
well, if based on what we know of Lyanna and her character and based on what we know on Rhaegar and his character, like how would they have
Right.
and say Elia Sand and how she's talking to Garibald Shells,
And though we don't have to believe the whole Night of the Laughing Tree story or believe that this was like a nice, fun flirtation that they had, there had to be some precursor to the abduction, right? He didn't do it out of nothing. So they met in some wise at Herrenhall, I think.
Right. You know, it can't just be that he looked at her and was like, that girl's hot. Like, you know, because she's not, she's, you know,
and that
she's
doesn't
not
fit the character that he writes, these strong women. Like, she wouldn't just be a hapless victim to someone she doesn't know.
Yeah. There's
That's
recently
what Robert thinks of her.
There's this
He's
big
wrong.
debate that keeps coming back in the fandom about the abduction and how, like, you know, is Rhaegar sketchy because he's so much older than Lyanna, and
Of course he is.
You know, or is that situation, but Lyanna is supposed to be this bold character with all this agency, you know, and it's like both of those things can be true. They can both be happening at the same time. It doesn't have to be either or.
It doesn't excuse Rhaegar and this age difference and the fact that he's married to have Lyanna be this strong character who is kind of engineering this on her own as well.
Yeah. It's like Indiana Jones and Marion Raventree. Be good the voice to say, color a Nausicaa and take a timber that you shall find lies in the cellar charred among the raspberries, and hew and shape it for a door sill or corner piece. In a new cottage on the ancient spot, the life is not yet all gone out of it, and come and make your summer dwelling here, and perhaps she will come, still unafraid, and sit before you in the open door with the flowers in her lap. Flowers in her lap? it's very Herrenhall. Until they fade, but not come in across the sacred sill. I wonder where your oracle is tending. You can see that there's something wrong with it, or it would speak in dialect. Whose voice does it purport to speak in? Not old grandsires, not grannies, surely. Call upon them. They have best right to be heard in this place. You seem so partial to our great-grandmother, 9 times removed. Correct me if I err. You will be likely to regard as sacred anything she may say, but let me warn you, folks in her day were given to plain speaking. To think you'd best tempt her of such a time, it rests with us always to cut her off. Well then, it's Granny speaking, I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong to take it as I do. There's no names quite like the old ones, though, nor never will be my way of thinking. One mustn't bear too hard on the newcomers, but there's a dite too many of them for comfort. I should feel easier if I could see more of the salt wherewith they're to be salted. What's the meaning of the more of the salt wherewith there be salted?
Well, you know, they're unsalted as in they're new. They're new names,
unseasoned.
New families.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Unseasoned, exactly. Yeah. So she's saying, yeah, she doesn't have any problem with these new folks, these new names, but she wants to see them a little bit more seasoned than they are.
Gotcha. Son, you do as we're told. You take the timber. It's as sound as day when it was cut, and begin over. There, she'd better stop. You can see what's troubling Granny, though. But I don't think we should sometimes make too much of the old stock. What counts is the ideals, and those will bear some keeping still about. I can see we're going to be good friends. I like your going to be. You said just now, it's going to rain. I know, it was raining. I'll let you say all that, but I must go now. You'll let me say it, or consideration. How shall we say goodbye in such a case? How shall we? Will you leave the way to me? No, I don't trust your eyes. You've said enough. Now give me your hand. Pick me that flower. Where shall we?
So she demands a flower from him before they part. Much as we might imagine Lyanna asking to be crowned with flowers before she parts with Rhaegar.
Oh,
which
that's
is in fact
interesting.
what happens. And we already had that image of her with flowers in her lap, which is precisely the way she was given flowers
It's an
apparently.
interesting idea, though, that Liana demands the flower. You know, where shall we meet again? Nowhere but here. Once more before we meet elsewhere. In rain? It ought to be in rain. Sometime in rain. In rain tomorrow shall we, if it rains. But if we must, in sunshine. So she went. So they agree to meet again.
And she, in fact, kind of takes charge at the end of the conversation. She demands the way that they say goodbye. And we don't exactly see what's happening after they take each other's hands. There's that pause before pick me that flower. We can
Yeah.
imagine any body language or kisses that we want, and then demands the flower, and then she decides when they're going to meet again, teasing him that, oh, we'll meet
Right.
if it rains, but if we have to, then in sunshine. So in fact, it's a set date that they're going to meet, which I relate to Liana basically arranging the location and time of her own abduction.
Yeah. Yeah. Which it does seem that it would be around the same place.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I always kind of say that the Wayward Bride imagery from A Dance with Dragons seems to relate to Liana, like being on a horse next to a lake, which is Alice Karstark, but John thinks it's Arya, but it would also fit if Liana is riding this horse next to the God's Eye,
Mm-hmm.
but but overall, we made it through the whole thing.
Nice.
Only took us 40 minutes.
Yeah.
But
yeah. Is there anything we failed to? So the visions and voices that they hear from ancestors, it's happening under what they call the family tree, which I wanted to point out is like the the trees that they have in the heartwood is what they're called, heart trees.
Yeah, that's the interesting. It's funny. We've thought about all these things a bunch, but like,
Mm-hmm.
it's funny that the parallel of the tree, the werewood tree, being such a central idea in the story, connecting it to family tree, like those two things.
Mm-hmm.
People don't talk about that connection. That like, okay, what are the two most important things in the story? Well, you got the family trees are really important, and the werewood trees are also really important. And it's like it's one of those like slap you on the head and go, "Oh, right, trees,"
Right, and
like,
both of them literally give you the voices of the ancestors out of them in the
right.
story and in the poem.
You're right. That like the idea being that your family tree, like, and everything with regards to like the culture of your, like, not only the genes but the culture of your family, like, seems to
Mm-hmm.
echo through time. And then you've got the werewoods, which literally like have their souls who actually talk to people like over time, right?
Yes. So in the poem, they're being metaphorical and playful. He's inventing these speeches, both from the first speaker, who is false because he's not speaking in old timey dialect, as she points out. Give me a new speech and in something that sounds like 9 generations ago. And then he gives the speech in dialect as Granny. So he's making it up. But the
Yeah.
idea of being under the family tree and getting these voices out from the tree is suggestive, entirely suggestive of exactly how werewoods work in the final story. And it's
Yeah.
Starks doing this at their ancestral home, like the heart tree, the werewood in Winterfell.
I mean, if this were a coincidence, and you get, of course, like a million people kind of say like, oh, whenever I do analysis, there's a million people that comment, Preston, you're just making shit up. You're overanalyzing. Like, this is all imagined stuff. And there obviously people do come up with imagined stuff, but
Mm-hmm.
in this situation we're talking about, they're talking about trees. They're talking about a Stark cellars, being over the cellar that all the Starks came out from.
7 caves,
7
incest
caves.
as a result of isolation of these families.
2 people that are descendants that have like relations agreeing to like come back together and breed and start anew, build a new house atop the old house and the old ruins,
Mm-hmm.
to renew, essentially, to renew the world. In this case, they're trying. they're talking about building a house on top of the ruins of the first house and starting the Stark lineage anew. Um,
Right.
um, one could say kind of, perhaps the same thing with Targaryens and Starks or something, the Lyanna.
Hmm. And the point
But
isn't that there's a one-to-one
yeah,
necessarily connection of exactly like Jon and Arya, exactly like Lyanna, Rhaegar. It's that all of these ingredients are the same ingredients that we see, have a dozen of them all over the story of Ice and Fire. And we know that he read this poem, like, be real. It's from Robert Frost's most famous collection, North of Boston. We know that Fire and Ice is this poem that he's familiar with. It's that he named the whole series after. We basically know Mending Wall is super connected to the Wall, and it's the same collection of poems as this Generation
yeah,
of Men poem. So I think it is, 99.9% certain he has read this poem. And he read it probably while he was coming up with the original story, when he was in that infant phase, when he wasn't sure what he was doing with Jon and Arya, etc. And so it might not be that he directly took this whole idea of the Herrenhall events directly from this interaction of these characters, but he could not have failed to be influenced by all of these ideas being put together in this form, and by this name of Stark, by all of these
yeah.
things.
I mean, it being Starks is also. I mean, I've never met anyone with the surname Stark in my life, but
No.
you know, the only Starks I know are Iron Man and
Mhm.
and Ice and Fire, and now this poem. Maybe somebody has some other ones, but
Yeah, so compare Tony Stark and whatever connections you can come up with there to the incest possibilities, the family tree at the ancestral home that produces visions and voices, uh, just
right, right. I
all the
mean,
connections with the references in here to Viola and Nausicaa, which I already ran down, but
yeah.
you
I'm
could say
gonna.
those are accidental. Like, he just happened to be referencing Twelfth Night separately from this poem, but you
Yeah.
know.
I mean, obviously there's a lot of. I mean, 12. Well, to be fair to 12th Night, anytime you do gender bending in fiction, you're always referencing 12th Night. Everyone always
Of
references
course,
twice
of
12th
course.
Night as like the main thing. But yeah. I'm
Uh,
going to answer a few
one,
super chats. You're
sure, yeah.
welcome to stick around if you like, or uh, I'll try to move
Um,
your.
Here, let me last thing.
Okay.
In Twelfth Night, Viola, who was being compared to the Star Girl in this poem, has
Hmm.
this line: "My lord and master loves you. Oh, such love could be but recompensed, though you were crowned the nonpareil of beauty." So Viola, who's mentioned in this poem, has this line specifically about someone being crowned the nonpareil of beauty, crowned like a queen of beauty.
Oh my God!
So
Really?
this is
Oh my
another
God!
connection to the Lyanna Rhaegar situation, and
Do
she's
people? I
called
mean,
a
this
Viola.
Queen of Love and Beauty thing. I would love to know about like historically.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah,
did
I'm
people
sure it
get
doesn't first
crowned
appear
Queen
in
of Love and
Shakespeare,
Beauty? you know?
but wherever it came from initially, people like George R. R. Martin, we have it from the Shakespeare references. We have it
Yeah.
from these lines like in Twelfth Night, where she talks about it. So it's just another bit of suggestive connection, that he was reading this, he was thinking about the references, all of it was in his head at the very least. But okay, yeah, that's, I think, the last little note I wanted to hit. We're saving
That's
super
pretty.
chats.
So now I want to look up. Now I want to look up crowning people queens of beauty, and if there's anything besides 12th Night that where things come up,
Mm-hmm.
because that might be the only one.
Act 1, Scene 5 of 12th Night, if you're
Yeah.
interested.
Oh well. Oh man.
But yeah, I've been on here I'll stay for what, 10 more minutes? Is that
Okay.
fine? Making an
Sure.
even hour?
All right. Sounds good. Sounds good. I will move over here and then answer a few things here. Okay. First, do we know when Septons first came to the wall? I don't think it's ever been mentioned. It seems like it would be something that happened a long time ago. Um, they almost speak of John going out and saying his vows in front of the werewood as something that's a rarity. Strangely enough, even though the Starks supposedly have these connections to the Night's Watch, and the North is supposedly supposed to have more connections to the Night's Watch, when it comes time for John to say his vows, they act like, oh, it's just you and Sam. I guess we're just, that's it. No other Northerners, and you just kind of like go out. And we hear about it again with there's a bunch of suck ups that want to like please John, and they go out. I think Satin and the two twins from Fair Isle like want to go out, and maybe Jax, the wildling, he wants to go out and but it just doesn't seem like, you wonder where the Northerners are. So you'd think that, okay, the sept needed to be there. You need the sept for the vows. You need the septon for the vows. So I would say that the septons being at the wall would be there from whenever the Andals first arrived. It would have to be like immediately, that be part of it, would be my guess. Ned is remarkably insouciant. These are these words. I'm really hitting a lot of words. It's a lot of words that I'm not familiar with here. Insouciant, showing casual lack of concern and indifference. Okay. Ned is remarkably insouciant about his kid risking death or serious injury. Also, Jaime Cersei convo doesn't make any sense. If they didn't kill Jon Arryn. Oh, okay. So, regarding the Jaime Cersei conversation, yes, that conversation really doesn't make any sense. And this week I'll be posting a special video. Trey, the explainer, and I sat down and we talked about Bran 2 for an hour. It's currently up on my Patreon, but I'll post it. I'm going to post it on the main channel this week. But we talked about Bran 2 for an hour. And yeah, Bran 2, I would say it's the first shitty paragraph that George R. R. Martin wrote. Like, it's a mess. It's a fucking mess. It's so filled with errors and retcons. It's still a beautiful, obviously George R. R. Martin's a genius and a wonderful writer. And, and everybody has a lot of fond memories of that chapter. But if you go through it slowly, it's a real mess. And that conversation between Jaime and Cersei does not make any sense. Or has been retconned to hell. So, but yes, Ned is, doesn't really care about his kids risking death or serious injury. Yeah, I guess not. I guess he, they all come from this life of thinking that boys need to be boys and need to train and need to take all of these risks, and that's part of like being a man. I mean, I'm surprised how many people are so gung-ho about going to war and sending their kids off to war. Like, oh yeah, I'll send my son, and how few people are like, oh, I don't want to send my son, but
this is a quick random thought that I just had. Since we're talking about 12th Night, that is a story where Viola dresses up as a guy, and she has a twin, Sebastian, who comes back into the story, and they look so similar when she's dressed up as a guy that people confuse the two of them. Now, like that isn't something that we've pointed out. That's not something that really happens in real life. Like, you couldn't really just have these twins, a boy and a girl, that dress the same and so they look exactly the same. But it does happen in 12th Night, and it does happen with Jaime and Cersei.
So
another little connection to make us think that he's drawing something. But again, everyone's drawing from 12th Night.
That's true. That's a good point, though. Frost overrated, Thoreau better. Transcendentalism. In truth, I've never really connected with Frost myself, but obviously most people agree that he's one of the greatest poets of the 20th century, and so the one thing that's really weird, I've heard Frost read his own poetry, and if you thought I was very clumsy in my reading of Frost, the only thing worse is Frost reading Frost. Like he's
I've never
horrible.
listened. I only
Will,
read
have
it
you ever
down.
heard Frost's read his own stuff?
No.
Oh, he reads it because he doesn't want to color like the meaning with his own intonation. He reads it in this monotone fashion.
Oh no.
Oh yeah. So I've heard him read like the two roads in the forest, and he just reads it like, and then I came to two roads and you're like, oh my gosh. Like,
Okay, well, it's better on the page, in my opinion.
yeah, obviously. Yes. But that's the thing. I think he has a voice for writing, as they say.
Yeah.
You know,
And well, whatever we think of Frost, George thinks pretty highly of him, or he wouldn't have named his series Song of Ice and Fire.
That's true. That's true.
His magnum opus.
Sirio is kind of overrated in the fandom and theories. Yes, I mean, I think it's considering he appears in like 2 chapters and he dies maybe. I suppose his ghost exists and is more salient because all of his sayings and his training of Arya and things like that kind of come back. But you are right that he's a character that everybody kind of obsesses over, when that kind of obsession just doesn't exist for other characters. I'm trying to think of like an equivalent character who just kind of appears. I mean, you could take a character like the Ghost of High Heart. Like people do talk about the Ghost of High Heart. Ghost of High Heart probably has more page time than Sirio, but people don't theory craft too much about her, other than like what the meaning of her theories are. But no one talks about like, is she going to come back into the story? What role is she going to play? Well, no one cares. Mm-hmm. They're just like, well, she's just an albino dwarf who lives in the.
And for people Arya was with, and then they died. I mean, she spent way more time with Yoren, right?
Right.
Overall,
absolutely.
Hours and hours, days and days together, and no one's talking about Yoren, the profound difference he made in Arya's adventure.
Yeah,
He's gone.
Yoren. That's a good example of like somebody that. Yeah. People do make some theories about Corran Halfhand, but I feel like Sirio comes up a lot more than Corran Halfhand even.
Well, we try to forget Corran exists, so we don't have to think about how nothing makmakes sense.
Yeah.
As much as your series did its best to add it all up, I have to say, I think George just
was just writing and was just going on the Corran story.
I think it's a contrivance to get John, where he needs to be.
Yeah, that's true. Something to push the plot where it needs to be. In Dany 4, Game of Thrones, she thinks, when her son sat the Iron Throne, obviously son would be the line, but Dany supports Viserys, who is young and would plan to marry for allies and have kids. A George R. R. Martin slip-up. In this case, I'm looking this up again because
is this early enough that Dany's thinking about herself marrying her brother? Because we know that was her idea as a kid.
Yeah,
I forget at what point she dropped it.
She wondered if so it comes from, yet they were bound to Drogo for life, so Daenerys had no choice but to accept them, and sometimes she found herself wishing her father had been protected by such men. In the songs, the White Knights of the Kingsguard were ever noble, valiant, and true, and yet King Aerys had been murdered by one of them, the handsome boy they now call the Kingslayer, and a second, Barristan the Bold, had gone over to the usurper. She wondered if all men were as false in the Seven Kingdoms. When her son sat the Iron Throne, she would see that he had blood riders of his own to protect him against treachery in his Kingsguard. It very well may be a George R. R. Martin slip-up, but I think if you're going with like headcanon explanation, it's no, Daenerys actually has secret ambition in the back of her head, and that she totally does think, plan, hope that Viserys is going to die, and that she is going to, take his place.
In a way, kind of unaware of it herself. Because she
Yeah.
denies this being, something she explicitly wants. She says she wants
Right.
Viserys, but this is maybe telling us, if we want to believe that without her being aware of it herself, she thinks that she deserves this at this point.
Yeah,
what she's going through with Drogo.
It's a really great. It's one of these lines that, like, I fully admit it could just be a George R. R. Martin slip up, because George does slip up.
Mhm.
However, it's a George R. R. Martin slip up that makes the story much more interesting and rich. And
I like Dany better if she's ambitious.
Right. It might be by accident. It very well might be by accident. This, however, it's there and it's canon now. And so, no, Dany was thinking, it's right there in the text. Dany was thinking about the death of Viserys, fairly early.
I like it.
Yeah. And that changes our story, but it very, could have been, but
all right. I approve of that one, and I'm getting out of here. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Thank you for joining us, Will.
Next time I have a Robert Frost poem to explicate with you, I'll be right back.
So. All right. Sounds good, man.
Later, everyone.
Later. All right. Is Herrenhall cursed? Do you have any mini theories are 100% true and happening, published books, and you don't mention because of spoilers? No, I will spoil anything. I don't have anything that I don't tell you guys that with regards to the story that isn't something that, I would spoil anything. There's nothing I know about that I won't mention because of spoilers or anything like that. No, I didn't sign any agreements or anything like that. But is Herrenhall cursed? I don't believe curses are a thing. I don't think that's actually something in our story. Like, I don't think that's a form of magic that we see in the story. I think the magic that we see is telepathy and telekinesis related, and a curse, as in like a disembodied ghost of luck that would like be on something, like that kind of magic is not something that is in the story. In order for it to be there, in order for the curse to be real, you'd have to have perhaps the Children of the Forest or Bloodraven or somebody would be constantly watching Herrenhall and constantly wanting no one to really be ruling it or something, that there be active sabotage. I'd sooner believe active sabotage, but I don't know. Also, I don't necessarily think I think the point is that Herrenhall represents wealth, and that's because everybody's constantly trying to grab that wealth. That's the curse. Like, people talk about the curse of oil, that nations that have oil tend to be, they talk about this like, oh, shouldn't it be super lucky that you'd find huge oil wealth underneath your country? And it actually ended up leading to a lot of instability in nations when you have a bunch of oil wealth. The big exception being Norway, but Norway purposely set up a very special trust where they take all of their oil money and put it into this fund rather than having it be like, private wealth of a few individuals where there's, corruption and wealth inequality and things like that. So I think Herrenhall is like that. It's just so much land, so meaning it's going to pull in so much wealth that it's just naturally leading to people wanting to kill the people that are in charge of it. And they don't have like the loyalty and establishment of the great houses to deal with it, to manage it. All right, let's see where we're going to get to next here. Read Rudyard Kipling's If poem on masculinity. Well, this seems like I mean, it's not a long poem, but it's one that I think takes time to analyze properly. It's not necessarily clear, but Rudyard Kipling is an interesting poet in how he influenced George R. R. Martin. Like Rudyard Kipling was. He wrote a lot about colonialism, but he was actually kind of sympathetic to colonialism. Like he cared about these places, and he really thought that and he cared about the people, and he kind of thought that like there was something that the West could bring to, places like India and stuff like that. And so for that reason, people, even though everybody likes his writing, there's in today's environment, people are very critical of Kipling, and George R. R. Martin is absolutely 100% critical of him. He's making the sort of Vietnam. He connects Vietnam in the story, and Sometimes Never Kill Man, which is named after a Kipling poem. He's taking the colonialism idea and relating it to Vietnam and saying, yeah, not a great idea. Was the cat's paw there for cat, as in a cat to kill a cat? Also, its mercy seems like a mantra, and he bleeds out his mouth, tasting iron as it happens. Well, I mean, he says to cat's face, "You're not supposed to be here." So that's the thing that makes me think that he's not there for cat. The actual line is right, he says, you weren't supposed to be here, he muttered sourly. No one was supposed to be here. So now you could argue that he's going for Arya. No one is supposed to be here. So I mean, it can't really be for Cat. Though I do have to say, when it comes to researching, taking down Bran as a target, it's a pretty big screw up. Kat has been in there every day, 24/7 for weeks. And the whole castle knows that she's been in there 24/7 every day for weeks. Like, everybody knows that. Yet this guy's like, no one's supposed to be here. What, like, who, where have you been, dude? Everyone knows that Cat's been in there. Anyway, Mercy seems like a mantra and he bleeds out of his mouth, tasting iron as it happens. I mean, it's definitely a mantra of the whole series that we hear mercy, mercy, mercy over and over and over again. Let's see here. It's funny that the term Yankee is mentioned, and in A Song of Ice and Fire, you get the Northern Puritan feel from the Starks. I mean, I guess Yankee does mean like Stark, does mean Northerner, right? So I guess the Starks are the Northerners because they're the Yankees. Oh, the guy who played Donna's dad in the 1970s show, his name was Don Stark. You know what's funny? Now, I'm going to bring up Don Stark for a moment. Oh, Donna's dad. Oh. Not Eric's dad. Because I was about to say Eric's dad has a big connection to George R. R. Martin because Eric's dad was played I mean, this is irrelevant to the question, but Eric's dad is Red Foreman, played by Kurtwood Smith. Kurtwood Smith was in the pilot for Doorways, which is what when George wrote A Song of Ice and Fire, he started in 91. He had to take a break because he was working on this pilot for Doorways that he was really convinced was going to get picked up. It's a little clueless. If you actually like see that, you can watch it. It's on Amazon. Doorways. It's very George R. R. Martin, and it's not very good, but it's very George R. R. Martin. He had to take a break for a while to work on that, and then when he came back around 93, he comes back in 93 to start writing a Game of Thrones again. But Kurtwood Smith was in the was one of the reoccurring. There's only like 4 people that were in the cast, and he was one of them. R plus L equals Dark Star. That'd be cool. Themes are for 8th grade book reports. Yes. Been rereading the sample chapters recently. Do you believe there is any point to the Bravos Faceless Men plot? It really just feels unnecessary. I do thematically understand why it's there, and it is there because George R. R. Martin is an atheist. However, he despises nihilism. And so, like, if you're going with, like, when we're talking about morality, okay, people generally say, okay, where does morality come from? Okay, so the religious will say, well, without religion, there's no place where morality will come from. So you need this moral code coming from God. Now, the criticism of that is, one, either there is no God, so that's stupid, or two, it's man choosing which of the codes to take. And so that, no one follows the Bible. No one is we all wear multi-blend clothing, which is forbidden in the Old Testament. But, why do we not follow that one? But, we follow thou shalt not kill, like what, well, we decided which one, right? So and then you kind of go, okay, well, if you knock down religion as a form of place where where morality comes from, then you can say, well, maybe it comes from human beings. And you're like, okay, but how does it come from human beings? Like, do you mean like we vote on it? Because then morality is just democracy. And you're like, well, that can't be right, because morality for man changes. And then you're like, well, then it's just like individuals. And so it's relativism, right? And different philosophers have tried to like break out of it being relativistic, but it's really, really difficult. Like it hasn't been done really to date. So you essentially have like objective morality from either a king or whatever, or a god, or you have subjective morality, and both don't really work out very well. So it leads to nihilism, right? Because nothing makes sense. So it doesn't matter. Everything's relative. It's nihilistic. But George hates nihilism. So you try to veer from nihilism back to, existential thought or something on where morality can come from. So it's a necessary, thematically it's necessary, because the story is about killing gods and killing kings and killing the concept of objective morality. But it's not saying that nihilism is the answer. There's some answer in between. So I understand why it's thematically there. Now, plot wise, like, people search for reasons. They're like, oh, there's still this faceless man cult that's trying to take over the planet or whatever, or something. The fans search. But you're right that it right now isn't very necessary to the plot, other than Arya's in it. But in the fanfic, we will be weaving it back in. We will be weaving the faceless man plot in. This is why Jockin is in Old Town and all sorts of things. So it'll come back in, but I understand why it's there. It kind of needs to be there for the themes, for the 8th grade book report. Queen of Love and Beauty is an Ivanhoe. Really? That's good to know. Also Ashby Tournament. Compare Ashton and Dunk and Egg. I see. I will have to look that up and read about that. But that is good to know. This is in the headshot. Queen of Beauty is used twice in the books. Where is this? Here we go. The phrase Queen of Love and Beauty is not George R. R. Martin. He was following the medieval tradition. It's direct inspiration from Walter Scott's novel Ivanhoe. In Ivanhoe, there's a tourney with a mystery knight in borrowed armor. I see. Another thing I have to read. For the disinherited knight past the gallery close to the prince, there's Lady Alyssa, who is seated in the full of pride, triumphant beauty. All right. I will have to be reading research that in the future. I think the other northern houses were more connected to the Watch long ago, when it was an honorable institution. These are these things, this myth of like northern honor. Like Ned Stark is honorable, but I just don't know if the other, like, if we have any evidence of of honorable Starks or honorable Northerners outside of Ned Stark. Like, is Rickard Stark, with his Southern ambitions, is he really an honorable dude? Is Brandon really an honorable dude, talking about blood dripping off his dick, being like, yeah, sword with blood on it is a beautiful thing. Is that our honorable dude? So uh, this is the thing we do. I mean, I'm not saying you're the only one, but like we all kind of project Ned as this, even though Ned's unusual, right? He grew up in the Vale, and he's very very different. He's brought a sept in. He's an unusual man. It's what I'd say. It's like our one idea of Vulcans is Spock, and you're like, but Spock was raised on Earth and is half human. Is he really the best example of a Vulcan? You know, like is Ned really the best example of a Northerner? Um, my theory is that the houses closest to the wall wanted the gift and lands beyond the wall. Oh, want the gift and the lands beyond the wall. If I were Lord Stark, I would let the Umbers have it. Yeah, I mean they were certainly upset when the gift was given. I'm sure they'd always want the lands back. Um, but it was kind of creative, you know. But the problem is that if you're giving it back to the Umbers, they would be the idea is that the wall would be losing incomes, right? Though then the gift kind of seems uninhabited. So how much income is the wall getting from it? So here's another Ivanhoe tourney champ crowns Queen of Love and Beauty. Yeah, I did not know that. Um, could the doom of Valyria be caused by an asteroid like the one which killed the dinosaurs? It's certainly possible, but um, you know, we don't know. My guess is that it's a nuclear weapon that they found. Some people think it's magic. Some people think it's a volcano. Some people think it could be a meteorite. You know, it's you know, George is ambiguous, but we simply don't have enough information. But I would say that like um, the imagery at least, and I'm not saying that the answer is necessarily nuclear, but the imagery that we're given is supposed to invoke the feelings of a nuclear um, fallout. Now, I'm not, you know, we're at least we're supposed to associate it, you know, with that. But so I would say that much. But you know, could it be a meteorite? You know, maybe, sure. But I think that that's my guess is found nuclear warhead of some sort. But you know, I'm a weirdo. Um, now noticing that Danny Four Game of Thrones. What's happening?
Tune in next time for when Preston uploads that convo on Brand 2 with him and Trey and nobody else. Nobody else was in that discussion.
Nobody else. Nobody else, man. Nobody.
You
Nobody else was in that
motherfucker.
discussion.
You son of a bitch. Honestly, I get this question all the time. Like, yeah, I usually stay quiet normally because I talk to you all the time. I talk to Trey all the time, and you guys
Yeah, yeah.
barely talk to each other. Trey doesn't even have Facebook, which is what you and I mostly communicate through. He
Mm.
has like, he's no Facebook, barely uses Discord. Like the only time I think we can ever
Yeah,
really
I mean,
like
his main thing is his main thing is Twitter.
of course.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, it's
um,
odd, and everybody has their own thing. Like some people's main thing is Insta, you know, and like,
true. I would you would think he would have Instagram, but I don't think he does. No, I wanted to. I love you. I do. You know this,
uh huh.
right? Yeah. But you're insane when it comes to hyperfixating on the books. You were talking to me about. I was thinking about this earlier. You were talking to me about your next overanalyzing and how you're gonna like focus on Beesbury.
Yeah,
You want to bring
we're
up
yeah,
that
we're talking about Beesbury. Yeah.
I just don't. I just don't agree with you. I don't think George like massively fucked up there because it's written in the perspective of ambiguity. Therefore, like they don't know what happened. History says this. History says that. Do you want to bring it up? Tell the audience.
All right. Let me answer this one, and then I'll bring up. I mean, you know,
You
I'll,
want me to?
yeah. I'll bring it up briefly. Now noticing that Dany for Game of Thrones thought came after she asked Jorah, "What if it wasn't Viserys, someone stronger?" After he said Viserys couldn't sweep a stable. Yeah, well, then maybe it's less of a fuck up and it's more of actually Dany planning. Then maybe it you know. So yeah, no, I think now reminding me of that. Now I'm leaning towards that Dany was always thinking about replacing Viserys, at least on some sort of weird subconscious level, that she wanted him to die. Um, that she did not so secretly hate him, for abusing her for years and years and years. Okay. You want to talk about Beesbury in...
I want to throw it to the audience because I want to know what the audience thinks because you think this is like a major George R. R. Martin fuck up. Like,
no,
even
it's just
going
it's not a major one. It doesn't affect the plot very much at all. It doesn't affect the plot at all. I'm just saying it's yet another like
George is lazy. What did you say?
Fire and Blood is fucking lazy. Okay, Fire and Blood
okay.
is really fucking lazy. It's a lazy fucking book filled with errors. There's so many errors in Fire and Blood that it's just like it's so many that it gets frustrating analyzing it because you're constantly at the point where you're like, well, it doesn't seem like our author actually thought about this. Oh.
You know what? Actually, really, real quick. You know what I really liked about Fire and Blood? It's the most completely random thing. I liked the Elisa Farman story. That was a really nice short story. He's really good at short stories. I'm always surprised by how like prolific authors are so good at writing these like couple page stories. And that one was really nice. Stephen King is the same way. Stephen King gets bored after
George
a
R. Martin is
while.
a trained short story writer. Like that's his
He's so
fucking
good.
if George R. R.
Bread
Martin
and
knows how
butter.
to do something, it's read a fucking good short story. Okay, so here's what I'm talking about. So this is Fire and Blood. This is right after this is the ending of the Green Council. And so this is where Beesbury gets killed, right? So he says, "And friends," Beesbury declared, "men of honor, who will not forget the vows they swore to her and her father. I'm an old man, but not so old that I will sit here meekly while the likes of you plot to steal her crown." And so saying, he rose to go. Now, the original Princess and the Queen does not have this section. This is added for Fire and Blood. This he said, she said that's coming up here. Okay? This is added material. In the original Princess and the Queen, it's simply the line here, Sir Criston Cole then forced Beesbury back to his seat and opened his dagger. And then it goes on to, no further dissent was heard after the death of Lord Beesbury. Now, so for Fire and Blood, George added these paragraphs. As to what happened next, our sources differ. Grandmaster Orwell tells us that Lord Beesbury was seized at the door and then escorted to the dungeons. Septus Eustace tells us differently. In his account, Criston Cole forced him to his seat. Mushroom charges that Criston threw him out a window. All three chronicles agree on one thing. The first bloodshed in the Dance with Dragons was Lyman Beesbury, Master of Coin, Lord Treasurer of the Seven Kingdoms. And then he goes back to Princess and the Queen material. Here's the problem. This sentence here. No further dissent was heard after the death of Lord Beesbury. You just fucking said that one of the stories was that he was brought to the dungeons.
May I throw you a curveball, sir and scholar?
Okay.
A love of mine. May I throw you a curveball?
Yeah.
How come? So you're hyperfixating on the Orwell thing, Maester Orwell. Okay, fine. You normally never believe Maesters, but this one time you're going to give Orwell the benefit of the doubt?
I don't give him Orwell the benefit of the doubt. it's very clear that the real story is that Kristen Cole shoved him to a seat. But this is written by Gildane. And Gildane is trying to cover for Orwell. And I mean, he would be trying to cover for Orwell. And like, if it were Gildane, if Gildane didn't believe Orwell, he would say, yeah, but this most certainly didn't happen. You know? Instead, he's like, well, what happens next? Our sources differ. And then all of a sudden we get this line that Beesbury's dead. I'm sorry. In one of the fucking stories, he wasn't dead. So, like, it's just George added this shit and then forgot to edit this line. That's all there is to it.
So you think this is lazy error?
I mean, yeah. I mean, I don't know, you know, how much I want to put lazy error, but it's a fucking error. He forgot to edit this, which is weird because he actually does add this line according to Mushroom. So there is an edit. Like he read this and edited it, but he just, you know, he did like one read through or something, and didn't. He added this in and then was like, okay, I'll keep going. You know, I guarantee had he given this to like Elio and Linda, they would have fucking caught that. You know, like you know, had they given it to somebody to edit and check his work, they would have caught that shit. But it's, you know, every 2 pages there's something like this. I'm kind of like, it's all over the place. I mean, you've been watching the Overanalyzing series. You know what I'm talking about. Like, it's constant
You're out of your
finding
mind.
errors.
You're out of your mind. I love you though.
I mean, so, here, look, I'll go back. Maybe it's intended.
I like what Ross wrote right there. If you scroll up a little bit, just a tad.
Somebody says here, I just assumed that he was thrown into the cells and died. Yeah. No, the problem is that's not what it says though. It says no further dissent was heard after the death of Lord Beesbury, meaning even if you're believing the story of him going to he can't die of a chill in the black cells that fucking fast. He's still on his way. He's still getting marched down to the black cells at this point. Okay. We're talking about no further dissent was heard. Dissent in the meeting. And then the next sentence is the rest of the night was spent making plans. Like, it's very clear that everyone was like, oh fuck, Beesbury died. No more dissent. In that meeting. It's very, very clear. It's just a fuck up. It's just a fuck up. You know, whatevs. Fucking Fire and Blood, man. The more I read Fire and Blood, the more I just get angry.
What Preston is trying to say, give it to me, George. I got you. Give it to me.
No, I mean, there's plenty of people. Like, I'm sorry. Like, there's literally tens of thousands of fans that are obsessed enough to catch that shit. If shadow babies are telepathy, did Brienne actually kill Renly? So here's the thing. Renly is not killed by a shadow. Renly is killed by an invisible being, some sort of invisible thing. Okay, the shadow. She's watching the shadow, but the shadow doesn't come up and kill anybody. Okay, he's killed by something invisible. And this is George's favorite movie is Forbidden Planet. And the plot of Forbidden Planet is about this dude who, he's got this hot daughter and people are hitting on his hot daughter and he's got subconscious telepathy. And every time he falls asleep, this invisible monster goes around killing people. And he wakes up and he's got memories. He's got dreams of the monster going around killing people. And so the whole idea is that like his id is the thing killing everybody, you know? Um, and so the Renly story is exactly the same as Forbidden Planet. It's precisely the same story. Stannis falls asleep. An invisible being goes out and does Stannis' subconscious bidding. And then Stannis wakes up and he has a dream memory of the event. Okay. It's precisely the same story as Forbidden Planet. And so, like, did Renly, no, like Stannis's subconscious mind definitely killed Renly. But what I'm saying is that if you think of it more like Stannis skin changing, warging open air, which is something we hear about in the Bran stories, like and the Varamir Sixskin stories, if you think of it more like it's Stannis' subconscious embodying telepathic, telekinetic like space, killing Renly, you know, it fits more like in the Forbidden Planet thing. You know, so it's not the problem with the shadow baby, like, you know, the shadow baby is Stannis, right? Like it supposedly looks like Stannis. Like we only call it shadow babies because later Davos sees a shadow come out of Melisandre's vagina. But a shadow doesn't kill Renly. An invisible monster kills Renly. But no, Brienne didn't kill Renly. Like an invisible, like Catelyn literally sees an invisible being kill Renly. Should I keep my 100% true mini theories to myself or share? I feel worse for having thought of them. All theories need to be told out. They need to be expressed at some point. You know, as bad as many of them are, all theories need to be out.
Bad as many of them are.
Oh yeah.
Very rarely does Preston actually go out of his way to say, "Damn, that fucking sucks." He does privately to me, but in public, no. You're a nice boy. You're a nice boy. I'm not.
I mean, I think it's funny to like come up with like really bad ones. Like, okay, I have a theory that actually Cersei was really in love with Robert, and
That's not bad. That's automatically funny.
That's like completely misreading the story. Cersei loved Robert, and she was really jealous of the Lyanna thing because she legitimately wanted to be with him. And when she was, you know, angry about the Pale Princes, she was told by her septa that, like, you know, you could become impregnated by consuming and eating semen,
Jesus,
rather than having it in your, yeah. Well, this is my really bad theory, Carmine. So
how is your bad theory still not even bad? That's just funny, and I'll take it. Like, okay, that's fine. A bad theory would be
she told her septa told her that babies were like grew in women's tummies, and so she really legitimately thought that she needed to eat semen to become pregnant. And so the Pale Princes, the consuming of the Pale Princes was
no, I got it. Yeah, I got it.
Yeah.
I got it. Yeah. A bad theory would be like, you know, old Nan is insert old character here, or Leaf is insert character here, or like that's a stupid theory. Like, no, George wasn't thinking about. You made a good point when we discussed it eons ago. George wasn't thinking about that back in the day. So, but that one's funny. I like that one. Cersei was in love with Robert the entire time.
Yeah, Cersei was in love with Robert the whole time. Yeah. In 3 words, I can sum up everything I've learned about life. It goes on. Frost. Words to live by. Do you have a favorite quote? Sometimes I hear quotes and I'm like, oh, that's so awesome. I need to remember that one. That's such a good quote. And then I fucking forget them. And then I fucking forget like these like incredible quotes. I'm trying to think of something like I really fucking loved. And yeah, something will come to me later. Obviously, there's these quotes that like I want to remember and then I always forget. And you're like, fuck. You know what I'm talking about, Carmine? You hear some great quote.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I need to start writing stuff down. Are we talking about Ice and Fire specifically, or any quote from anything and ever?
I think anything or ever.
Because Ice and Fire, I have one for you if you want to hear
Hmm.
it. Feast
Okay.
for Crows, Loris to Jamie. When the sun has set, no candle can replace it. That one is just perfect.
That's true. That's true. I mean, I think a lot of people like, that's why we make peace with our enemy. Like we make peace with our enemies. That's why we call it making peace. Though someone pointed out to me later, I think it was my wife. She was like, isn't that the same joke as like that's why they call it work and not sitting on your ass? Like, isn't it the same thing? Like, is that really that great of a quote? And I'm like, it is the same thing. And it's still a great quote. That's why they call it work. Work is hard. That's why they call it work and not sitting on your ass. Something good. I'm trying to like best quotes.
Before you continue on, did you see? I sent it to you on Facebook. By the way, when Will was on, I was trying to distract Will by sending him funny shit, but he was stone faced. Good on Will. Good on Will, my man. Stone faced. But did you see the thing I said? It's on Trey. Trey's uploaded on Facebook. Not Facebook. Trey uploaded on Twitter. Do you want to like go on Twitter and check out what Trey? He tagged you and me in it 3 hours ago.
Yeah,
So it's
yeah.
most recent.
Yeah, we talked about this. Here, I'll put this up. Here we go. It's like, sorry, Arya, women can't be warriors in Westeros. Brienne of Tarth, Mage Mormont, Alysanne Mormont, Daisy Mormont, Asha Greyjoy, the Sand Snakes, Mira Reed. And then what's this last thing? I'll have to zoom in. Oh, here we go. Hagen's beautiful redhead daughter, Sabbath of Frey, Visenya Targaryen, Genical Dark, Wyla of Will, Alysanne Blackwood. Yeah, you're right. Danelle Lawston, Wenda the White Fawn. Oh, that's true. All true. All right, or even if you want to say, Danny Flint. Trey. Do you think I should do the conversation with Trey about the best bears and twinks of Ice and Fire? Do you remember that?
No comment.
I think it's an interesting conversation because it is funny that like George R. R. Martin makes so many characters. Because Trey brought this up, he's like, George R. R. Martin's obsessed with making all these characters hairless. Like what? Like everybody's either super hairy or hairless in Ice and Fire. There's no one in between. Like no one has medium amounts of hair or a little bit of hair. It's all bearish or hairless. Who's hairless? What person, besides children? Is Lady Stoneheart possessed by the ghost of Mad Danelle? She has Kat's memories, but no interest in finding her children. Revival is complex and they share blood. Well, I don't know. Though it is odd that Kat seems very rather uninterested in finding her children. I don't necessarily think that connects us with Mad Danelle. Mad Danelle seemed to be focused on, from what we hear, leading armies, having telepathic connections with bats, bathing in children's blood. She doesn't seem so focused on revenge or phrase. So this you've rightly pointed out that Lady Stoneheart isn't acting like Kat. But what this idea is lacking is that Lady Stoneheart is acting like Mad Donnell. That's the trouble. Is Mad Donnell, like, you could reverse it and say, like, why isn't Lady Stoneheart acting like Mad Donnell? Could she actually be Kat? You know, like, you could reverse, like, you know, like, do you think religion will ever die? Would more political parties be better for the US? Check Has Been Hotel, good music and dark humor. Love you, P. What is, let's start with Has Been Hotel. Oh, this is a animated series. Has Been Hotel. Kind of reminds me of
Rent and Stimpy.
Yeah.
Has Been Hotel is, I feel as though, and this is not an insult, I feel as though if you were one of those kids in high school that was super emo or gothy or punk, but you know, painted your nails black, this is the perfect show for you. But for normal
What's
people,
it on?
I have no idea. It's on every torrent site that I go on to.
Really?
Don't you feign innocence? Oh, it's on Amazon. It's on Prime. There it is.
Oh, okay. So we can all actually, everyone can watch it pretty much. Do I think religion will ever die? No, I don't think religion will ever die. You know, the fear of death and the pain of people dying in our lives is so great that there will always be some sort of coping mechanism that will exist that people put faith into to make themselves feel better. You know, not to mention, like, you know, tradition and connection to your family and ancestors and all sorts of things that religion provides for people. So I don't think religion will ever die. Maybe organized religion, you know, might, but that, or might it break down to like small cults or something. But I don't know if like religion will ever die in that respect. I mean, the only thing that would kill religion is if somehow we have a comforting, we discover, like, science discovers a comforting fate for all of us after we die, which seems impossible. Would more political parties be better for the US? No, it wouldn't.
I disagree.
We don't have a parliamentary system.
No, I'll be very real with you. The current standing right now is actually great because going into 2024, you have Biden, Trump, of course, and you have RFK Jr., which is siphoning votes away from Trump. So
Right.
we should have a second crazy dumbass Republican Party that siphons vote from the real threat of the Republican Party. That way, them divided will never be a threat ever again, and we can win every time like we should.
You're talking about a very specific thing. Like, you're saying there should be more political parties because you would like the Republican Party to become fractured and
Yes.
then have a united Democratic Party
100%.
eat up all the votes. Fair enough. That would be a nice.
As jerky don't make a show, baby. Yeah, go ahead, RFK. Who's his vice president again? RFK Jr.
Oh, I don't know, some unknown businesswoman or something.
No.
Or it's not even a
that woman,
businesswoman.
yeah.
I think she's a widow, kind of like it's like a not a widow, but a divorcee who got all the guy's money.
Oh, there it is. That explains it all.
Yeah, I know. Which, by the way, divorcees that took a bunch of the guy's money is, I mean, the the woman that was married to Bezos, like she's like given almost like massive amounts to charity. Bill Gates's ex-wife, massive amounts to Melinda Gates, massive amounts to charity. Really good human being, Melinda Gates. Um, but I'm trying to remember
Nicole
the
Shanahan.
yeah,
Shanahan. Huh, there it is.
Nicole. Yeah,
She's 38. Ugh. Why, dude? Ugh.
what do you mean?
Why is she wasting her time? Like the general idea, the general theory is that they're in a relationship secretly, and he picked her because of that and the money. But if
Uh,
that's true, no.
well, I mean,
He's 70. Fuck.
that's I mean, for first of all, she for him, she's smoking hot. Like, what are you talking about? Like,
For
if
for him, but for her, like, don't waste your time.
I mean, yeah,
RFK is a weirdo.
he is a big weirdo. He is a big weirdo. Um, but yeah, no, she married this investor named Jeremy Krantz, and she divorced him, and then she married Sergey Brin, who was a co-founder of Google, and then she divorced him. And so she got quite a bit of even though she had a prenup, she got I think she got $1 billion from despite there being a prenup. Because I think the guy had 100 billion, and so she got like 1%. Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah. You imagine that. Anyway, like you get 1% and it's still $1 billion. Like, oh my god.
It's like less than a percent. Fuck.
I
Half a
know.
percent? Still a lot of money.
Right. Um, I meant prestige, glory, and material honor. Oh, this great quotes? Or what is this? Uh, I'm trying to sometimes I've or is this a previous thing from J Lord? What was the last? Wasn't that for long in the past, right? Well, use my search. Oh. Oh, this was referring to the North. And because I'd said that, like, oh, are they honorable? And he's saying he didn't really mean like the honorable. He meant like the prestige kind of honor. Yeah, I can see what you can see. I can see what you're saying. Okay, gotta keep going. Gotta keep going. I'm shocked about there being a basis for the Queen of Love and Beauty thing. Doesn't seem odd. State fairs forever in the United States had beauty pageants. Yeah, it is kind of funny that we. I suppose. Because I mean, if we are talking about, because Ice and Fire is so much about gender, and if we're talking about attorney being a display of machismo, men like bettering themselves in the most, competing with each other in the most macho way, it would be then paralleled with the females in the society competing in the most female way, right? Like men in the society are praised for their fighting abilities. Women in the society are praised for their looks. And so they're being actually put together. But actually what's very funny is that the man is the one who gets to crown the woman, right? It's the patriarchy, right? The patriarchy is the thing establishing that women are judged by their looks. It's not the most beautiful woman isn't deciding who the winner of the men are, right? Like it's the other way around. But it's from Ivanhoe anyway. It's like a real thing, but it's quite a description of the entire society, right? That the men who happen to be on top get to write the rules, right? Started watching Mrs. Davis, pissed my pants in the second episode, meeting the resistance. Then my wife kicked me out and started that apple tree show. First of all, the resistance is hilarious in Mrs. Davis. I don't want to spoil anything, but like every time they use the telephones and they break the telephones, and she's just like, that seems so wasteful. Wait, do you need to? But Mrs. Davis gets better and better as it goes too. That's what I love about it. And it has the Carmine seal of approval. He loved Mrs. Davis too.
I really liked it. Real quick before we moved on, we had this discussion. I don't remember where, but the discussion was, damn, I love Mrs. Davis. I just wish everybody had seen it. Like, I wish it was on HBO where everyone can see it. And you went off on a rant, and you mentioned Ash versus the Evil Dead. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Please repeat that rant, because you are so fucking right about this.
It was Bruce Campbell was in a interview, and he was talking about Ash versus the Evil Dead, and he's like, "Oh, this was a great show. It was reviewed really well." And he says, I was in this show. I'm sorry. He tells the story much funny. He better. He says, I was in this great show. It got great reviews, and everyone whoever saw it loved it. It was called Ash versus the Evil Dead, and it was on Stars. And the reason that the show failed is because it was on Stars. And he's like, if you haven't heard of Stars, I hadn't either. He was quite funny telling the whole story, but it is true that it just, that at least got 3 seasons, but it's just one of those situations where you're like, oh my gosh, like something that was so great. If it were on a better channel, people would have had more attention. There would have been more articles about it. Because does anyone write anything about stuff on Peacock? I'm trying to think that
Peacock would be like one of the big streamers because it's NBC, right? Like it's on back in the day, NBC was the place that everyone got all of their like favorite sitcoms from. But no, not really. It should have been on HBO. It might as well have been. There's like a couple sex scenes.
So it says, Peacock, it says that today Peacock has, 30 million subscribers, which is, is a lot.
Half of which probably have a free trial. Sure. Like, cause
Sure. So if I compare that to Netflix, how many subscribers for Netflix? Netflix has 270 million. So Peacock is about 10% of Netflix. And then like Max has 97 million. So like Peacock, it's not nothing, but it's literally less than a third of HBO, so it's too bad.
You
I
guys
think,
really need to
yeah.
watch Mrs. Davis. Preston's not exaggerating. We're not exaggerating. It's really good. However, if you're someone that like, if you're not into like stories that build and characters are great, like if you just want like dumb, fun Transformers Michael Bay style acts, not for you. But if you're like a grown
No,
ass
I mean,
adult,
it's definitely something you need to. It's a show you need to pay attention to. It's a show you need to think
hmm
about. It's a show that like, um, it's got a lot of themes. It's got a lot of meanings. It's got a lot of parallels. It's got a lot of references. You know, that's
you could write an eighth grade book report on this
you
show,
could write an
and
eighth
it
grade
would.
book report on it. No, that's true. Um, I mean, for a show about an artificial intelligence who's taken over the world and a cowboy and a nun who need to find the Holy Grail, they it's you know,
That
there's a
really
lot of
is
things you can write about it.
That really is the catch, because when I think of artificial intelligence that's taken over the world, I think of the Terminator franchise
Mm-hmm.
or the Matrix. But what you're saying is true, but also at the same time not really true. Like the artificial intelligence does take over, but not in that way, and it's actually very
Right.
well done. I've never seen anything like it before. It's a really
Yeah.
interesting take.
Yeah. Right. It's like it's one of these stories where you're like, how would someone even approach coming up with a story like that? Because the story is so large, but so small at the same time, right? And so ambitious, and they pull it off. They pull it off, you know. So, um, I think there's a warped honor in Northern culture, not one that we consider moral, but it would tie into the Scottish and Scandinavian inspirations. No, I mean, I completely agree. I mean, in general, George R. R. Martin's story is about how honor um, isn't really honor. Like honor, I mean, J Lord, you're tapping into the like, yes, one of the major themes of it is that like what we think of as honorable, as in being like publicly glorifying yourself, is not actually what is honorable in the sense of like morality sense, right? So there's that disconnect. Um, being the person that's going around who's the best at slitting throats in battle, like the mountain. The mountain has all this honor, but he's the least honorable character, right? And so Jaime Lannister did something that was not so honorable publicly, but his action privately is very honorable. So, but yes, it's you're spot on. You're spot on. um, Greyhead. This is funny, Carmine. This is going to be one that you're going to laugh at. Grey Wind's head was mounted on Wendell Manderley. Wendell Manderley is big, and it wasn't easy to mount, and he's the only person from the dinner who was shot in the head.
This is a theory that I'll take. Like, this is an interesting theory. There you go, Daniel. Fire up the microphone, Game of Thrones YouTuber in the making right here.
Yeah, the problem is they parade Rob's body around like that, and if it's Wendell Manderley, they're going to be like, oh God, this is so heavy. I guess maybe if there's enough of them, but they're like, oh my gosh, why does this person weigh 5 times more than a real human being?
By the way, on the topic of the Red Wedding, because someone just put another super chat, you'll get to it. I love the portrayal of the Red Wedding in the books versus the show, because in the books, I love how the Northern Lords kind of fight back, whereas in the show, it's more of a massacre. In the books, it's a fight. It's clearly a fight.
Yeah.
There are some Northern Lords who try to like shield Rob and like flip the table up, and Grey Wind gets out. Who was it? It was Jane's
not to
brother.
mention the outdoor and indoor aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So when we do the Telltale game, like we'll see, like clearly the Northern forces outside fought back a little bit, but I like the portrayal in the show better. Like the Northern forces weren't pussies; they didn't get completely slaughtered. It was a fight, but the show is just straight up massacre. I never really liked that.
Yeah. Hey Preston, I'm confused as to why Roose would strike a deal with Tywin in exchange for Warden of the North if he knew Tyrion was married to Sansa.
Ooh, that's a good question.
I'm calculating the timeline here of like what Roose did. Oh, I mean, one could say that like Tyrion wasn't married to Sansa yet when the deal was hammered out, but they of course had Sansa and knew that Sansa was probably going to be married to someone. I think originally people were thinking about Willis, right? And Willis, but it doesn't matter. Like Sansa is going to be married to somebody, right? And Sansa is going to take, is going to have a claim on Winterfell. So why would Roose Bolton agree to anything when Sansa Stark is still like roaming around? Now, I would say you could say that you could say that Roose Bolton is super calculating and is like, you know what? Everyone else is going to be fighting over Sansa. I've got Arya. He thinks he has Arya, or he doesn't care if he does have Arya, but he has somebody that could be Arya, and it doesn't matter. So he's like, everybody else will be fighting over Sansa. That'll end up bloody, and she'll be dead, and I'll have Arya. And so he could be playing a game theory situation where he calculated that Sansa was going to be out of the picture. And he was right. He was right. And he was so smart to make that calculus. That would be theory one. Theory two is it doesn't really matter. Like, he's going to take it, and he just needs a Stark to have enough legitimacy. Having Arya usurp Sansa, no small folk is going to sit there and be like, "Yeah, the succession," so it's kind of like having Lancel marry Gatehouse Amy. Like, Gatehouse Amy is a dairy, but if you actually look at the family trees, like, she's not actually the dairy that would have like rule. I think it would actually be Fat Little Walder. Little Walder, being a male, should come before Gatehouse Amy. I'm looking at the family tree really quick. Like, even if you're accepting that, it's gonna go to Maria, which I don't think it would. I think it would go to Cleos. Oh wait. Anyway, but even if you're assuming that it's going to go to Maria Derry, and the thing is that Little Walder exists, and he's male. He should come before Gatehouse Amy, but it was enough dairy to please the small folk. So it could be that it just, he has a Stark. He's got fake Arya. That's good enough. And he's not worried about it. Or he's super calculating and he's like, haha, Sansa's going to be out of the picture. And I've got Arya. But that would be I would lean towards the latter, that he's just like, it's good enough. It's good enough that I've got Arya. It doesn't matter.
But it's also kind of dumb on Bolton's part, because Tywin, do you remember the I forgot which chapter it was. I think it was I'm pretty sure it's in Storm, where Tyrion and Tywin have the conversation where Tywin basically says, like, it doesn't matter. We're going to let the Boltons fight the Ironborn for a bit, let them all like be depleted in strength, and then it'll go to your son by Sansa Stark. You know in that chapter?
Yeah, I know what you're saying. Yeah.
So, like, Roose is kind of dumb to trust Tywin, because Tywin never really trusted Roose. It all comes down to love the treason, hate the traitor. Tywin, who would ever trust Roose?
However, in A Dance with Dragons, Lady Dustin talks about Roose having ambitions to be king of the North. So it could be that like Roose, he gets control of the North, and if Tywin tries something like that, like Tyrion claiming Winterfell, he would just be like, fine, cut off the neck, Northern independence. So it would be as simple as that, and then the Lannisters are so depleted that they won't be able to take the Boltons out, get them out of the North, and so he could totally pull that too. Yeah, so that if they tried to install Tyrion, that he'd just be like, nope, I'm king of the North. So I think it was Lady Dustin quote. What is it? I think I'm going to check my thing. King in the North? No. King? Here it is. She says, truth be told, Lord Bolton aspires to more than mere lordship. Why not king of the North? Tywin Lannister is dead. The Kingslayer is maimed. The imp fled. The Lannisters are a spent force. Now she's making the argument that now the Lannisters are weak, and that he might have ambitions for king of the North. But, he could have had ambitions before that. My theory: Loras, sore, lore, ass. I'm not sure where the lore comes from, right? Like I get the sore ass, sore ass. I get that, but what's the lore? You can't just throw random words in there. Like what does lore have to do with what it has to do with Loras? What kind of lore comes from Loras? Sorella will kill a dragon. Probably Drogon. She 360 no scoping apples in the foggy dark at night. How big's a dragon eye is gonna be? Feel better or worse? Huh. You are right that it's something that people rarely think about is Sorella's archery abilities, right? Like everybody talks about her relationship with Marwyn, what's she doing at the Citadel? Who is she spying for? Like, what's she funneling back to Doran? People think about her in that sense, but we really are quite ignoring the fact that she is an insanely good archer. And like, how will that actually enter the story? I mean, I guess she can start taking down ravens, or something, but she's got to it's a bit of a Chekhov's gun. Like she's got to use that ability at some point, right? It's got to be at least mentioned or something. It's a good point. We hardly ever bring up her abilities. I'm a junior at Texas A&M. Is there more to find in Cushing? G-Steph won't be back to my Reddit DMs, trying not to duplicate research. There is more. Like obviously, G-Steph didn't go through every single box in detail. He might have looked through boxes, but I know there's a whole bunch of stuff on video games. I know there's a lot of stuff on and there's just a lot of detail if you go through the drafts, like going line by line and comparing line by line. You can probably find stuff. G-Steph didn't look at the most recent drafts. He went back to the first drafts. So he kind of is doing first draft, like earliest draft found versus published. But there are other drafts in between that may have tiny little changes. But so there's stuff there, but again, it's like olive oil. Like your first press, has a certain quality of oil. Your second press is going to have another quality. You'll if you go back and you spend hours and hours, you will find stuff. You will. Will it be as juicy as the stuff that's already been found? Probably not. But you'll probably find something. There's stuff. There's just the wealth of what's there. You'll find stuff. But plus, it's just probably an interesting experience to go in there. But But yeah, if you don't want to duplicate research, try to get a hold of him. If people be shaving silver hair, what the fuck do they do with their eyebrows? Carpet match the drapes. Huh. Does Varys have eyebrows? Do we ever hear about? We don't hear. No, that's curious. If this is the whole, if everybody's, what do Sansa's eyebrows look like? Okay. Luckily, in all of Ice and Fire, eyebrows are only mentioned 28 times. We hear about Tyrion's eyebrow. We hear about Varys' eyebrow. Or not Varys, Littlefinger's eyebrow. Tyrion's eyebrow again. It says that Brynden Tully, we hear about his fat caterpillar eyebrows. Littlefinger's eyebrows. Littlefinger's eyebrows. Man, Littlefinger... Oh my God. Littlefinger's just raising eyebrows all over the place. Blackfish's eyebrows. Tyrion's eyebrows. We hear Balon Greyjoy's eyebrows. Jorah eyebrows. Trying to think. Rattleshirt Oberyn's eyebrows. Bronze Jan has bushy eyebrows. Brendan's eyebrows. Miranda's eyebrows. Littlefinger's eyebrows. Halfmeister's eyebrows. Inkpot's eyebrows. Hisdar's eyebrows. Sorry, no, we never hear about Varys' eyebrows or Elaine's eyebrows. So we don't know if they dye them. Maybe if they're dark, people don't look at it. But man, that's got to be something somebody's going to come up. Like Elaine, like your eyebrows are fucking red. Your eyebrows are fucking auburn. Like what the fuck is wrong with you? Oh man. Would America benefit from a parliamentary system? I think so. I think that as we've seen in, I don't know, countries that have parliamentary systems, you end up getting in new different ideas that can help affect government. The idea though with the two parties is that you're theoretically keeping out of the fringe ideas, and moderating everything. But right now that's not really the case in America. But I think I don't know, parliamentary systems seem to function a little better than, maybe I'm wrong. I mean, Japan has a famously broken parliamentary system that doesn't get anything passed ever. See, I don't know. I'd have to. This is my whole thing. Like, what does Sweden have? Do they have a Congress or a parliament? Probably a parliament. Sweden has a parliament. So, um, how do you cope with loss? I mean, generally speaking, I cope with loss by kind of understanding that all of our ideas on the universe are very small. I just kind of remind myself that all of these people that are sure of anything are wrong. That like things are very, very unexplained. And so anything is possible. And that's how I mainly kind of deal with it all. You know, you think about little things like just because something's temporary doesn't mean it doesn't have value. We have no idea about like what might happen when we die, like none. There's the universe is much, much richer than we can even comprehend. Like, so, it's, that's mainly the comfort is the, we don't know. That's the comfort, Fallout thoughts podcast. Did I miss it? Carmine, what's we talked about Fallout. Yeah.
Yes, of course.
That do we
Do you want to put that out tomorrow?
Sure. I mean, I didn't know if you posted it to a Patreon or
No, I haven't yet. I should have. I've been fucking busy. But yeah, no, you want to post it tomorrow?
Yeah, get our Fallout discussion together while people are still talking about it. But yeah.
Oh, people can be talking about it for a while now. It's one of the top 5
yeah.
shows.
Are you posting it on yours?
On my channel?
Do you want to post it on your channel?
No, you post it on yours. What do you mean?
All right, if you want to give me
I got you.
Here's just free money. Just hand it. Okay. Yeah, give me the Fallout. We talked. Carmine and I talked about Fallout. We had a lot of things to say to Fallout. How long was our Fallout discussion?
About an hour.
About an hour. Yeah, but Carmine and I both really liked it. It was very good. And I mean, it's a remake of Westworld, but it's very, very good. It's very, very good.
You blew my fucking mind when you said that. I didn't put the pieces together.
We talk about it's Westworld a bit, but yeah, yeah. No, but yeah, we'll post it. We'll post it. We'll post it this week. Hopefully. Thoughts on Philip Roth? I'm rereading Operation Shylock, and I'm finding it very poignant on what's currently going on. I don't think I've read anything by Philip Roth. Right, I'm trying to think of anything. No, I'm sad. Sadly, I have not read anything by him. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I am in not learned enough here. But here he is, that 1970s look, that great 1970s look that people had back then. No one will ever look like 1970s ever again. No one will ever do the whole like thinning on top, clown hair to the side thing anymore. That's just never going to happen ever again. But that was very 70s. Okay. Try to get to the. Am I getting close to the end here? Because I gotta go to bed. Could Walder and Roos have begun the idea for the Red Wedding, not Tywin? Back when Fat Walda married Roos in Clash. Feels easier to bring the Lannisters into that alliance than Tywin approaching them. So certainly when you look at Roos's behavior, all the way back to a Game of Thrones, he's acting weird. Like he's keeping his forces in the back, things like that. He's definitely from the beginning keeping his options open. And I think there's even a So Spake Martin where George mentions that Roos was a type of person to keep his options open. So he kind of knew from the beginning that Roos was going to betray them, you know. But could it be actually Walder and Roos? The problem with including Walder that early is that the phrase dedicate a lot of forces straight up. Like they don't hold back. They throw thousands of dudes in and they're fully committed to Robb's cause. And then they're not, you know. And so had Walder known early, he would have acted more like Roos. But he doesn't. Like you see Roos acting funny, but you never see Walder act funny until you know the switch happens. So I'd say that like it's probably not something Walder was thinking about betraying Robb, you know. Like Walder and the phrase were legitimately committed, you know, and gave, you know, massive amount of forces, you know. Not to mention, you know, he's throwing wards around, giving people hostages constantly, you know. He was in there. He didn't know Robb was going to betray him. You know, that's the thing is if it's Walder's plan, how can he guarantee that? If it's Walder and Roos's plan, how can he guarantee that Robb, like early or like around the wedding, like how can he guarantee that Robb is going to get injured, go to the crag, and then fuck Jane Westerling, and then choose to marry her? You know, it's and betray. How can he? How does he know that Robb's going to betray him? That's the problem with anything early like that. Just a friendly reminder, in Sansa 1, we're first introduced to the Rhaegar is Mance plot. I'm curious to see if you find the Ruby conversation important. Yeah, this is we will get to that soon. I'm not very far from Sansa 1 actually in the going over. So we'll see about that. We'll see about that. Rhaegar is Mance. Oh man, I still remember the first time I was introduced to that theory. Somebody was really like baiting me, being like, "You've almost figured it out," and I'd be like, "No, I don't know what you're talking about." Like, dig a little deeper. It was like, dig a little deeper, and you've almost got it. You're like, why don't you just fucking tell me? Like, Knowing that Kat and Cersei are parallel characters, why doesn't the fandom accept that Kat is a terrible person, but Cersei is? I think a lot of the fandom does think that Kat is a terrible person, but I don't think Kat is a terrible person. You know, it's Kat is a terrible person if you're really focused on John 2, you know, and people focus on that and they focus on like Kat kidnapping Tyrion. But you know, every character makes an equal number of like weird mistakes. You know, like honestly, everybody loves Ned, and yet in Bran 1, Ned brings his, how old's Bran? 7 at the beginning of the story. Gonna get it. He's 8. He's 8 at the beginning of the story. But honestly, like, say someone, you know, say someone was like, oh yeah, I took my 8-year-old to an execution. Like, wouldn't you think that person's a horrible person to bring an 8-year-old to an execution? And it's like, yeah, like Kat, she had a really, you know, she said to John like it should have been you. That's pretty fucking mean. That's pretty mean. You know? That's but Ned brought an 8-year-old to an execution. So I don't know. It's all these people are pretty horrible. Like Tyrion's just beating kids right and left. Just slapping Joffrey in the face for being a teenager. You know, all these characters. Khal Drogo's the coolest guy in the world, except he's also a pedophile. You know, like all these characters are horrible, but for some reason, people fucking don't give Kat any breaks. They give Kat 0 breaks. I mean, Arya murdered some innocent people. You know, Arya's like people. Their favorite character. Arya's my favorite character. She's murdered people. She's just murdered innocent people. I think you've said before that there are parallels to global warming in George R. R. Martin's writing. Was this a hot topic in the early 90s when writing Game of Thrones? Oh yeah. I mean, global warming, people like to joke that like back when the first Earth Day went on, like there was a fear of global cooling, but like people have been talking about global warming since I'm trying to think like when it was really when they really started talking about it. I'm like, I think around 75. And then here we go. NASA climate scientist James Hansen used it in his 1988 testimony. He used the term global warming. So it's definitely yeah. I mean, I certainly remember when I was young. I mean, from just my own life. But yeah, I mean, this is. Can I shrink this? What the hell is going on here? Let's shrink. So I mean, you can kind of see that global warming, like even in an anecdotal sense, like when the warm records start hitting, which is, you know, you get this huge hot year in the 70s, and then it just starts getting all these hot years. Like people were certainly talking about it in the 80s, and you know, I remember them talking about it in the 80s, you know. Um, and Carmine, before I go, is there anything else you wanted to talk about?
No, I think that's it.
Do we know how Vic was meant to die? If not, what would it be? The only reason we know that Vic was supposed to die is because George had an outline of chapters, where he kind of says, where he just kind of lists another Victorian chapter, and he says Victorian dies, and that's what he put. It was in an outline of like chapters he hadn't written yet for A Dance with Dragons, A Feast for Crows. And so that's the only thing, is that he literally just wrote it in an outline that Vic dies. And you're like, oh, okay. But I mean, people guess like how he would have died. Probably the infection in his hand is the idea, like the craziness in his hand or something would cause him to die or go insane or something. Is the thing people normally think about. But maybe he, I don't know, maybe makes it to Slaver's Bay, gets eaten by a dragon. It's hard to know. But George's original plan was Victorian dies, but then he didn't. All right. Electric vehicles use much more energy to produce and operate. Terrible idea. Well, so the idea here is that not all energy is the same. You've got clean energy and you have energy that produces carbon emissions. So I'm not sure if electric vehicles use more energy than gas vehicles. I would doubt it, just because gas vehicles are getting your car to go somewhere, but also producing a lot more heat. So I would guess not. But even if electric vehicles use more energy, which I don't think they do, but we're talking about greenhouse gas emissions. So the idea is, if you have an electric vehicle, your greenhouse gases are produced by an array of things. Now, if you're if it's nothing but coal burning power plants, yeah, it's no improvement over gasoline. But the idea is that you'd have some green energy in there: solar, wind, nuclear, and then you'd have and that would be a better way to get your energy than petroleum. I mean, right? This is kind of stuff that most of us learned when we were 14, right? How's the finger physio? I know. I just, I haven't been in any, like, I've done searches for like physiotherapists, and I haven't really been able to like find what you're talking about, and like my finger is also so frozen that I don't know how anything can actually like move, like, or start again. Like I push on this frozen finger as hard as I can and hoping that it would like move. How do they get that first move going? That's what I'd want to know about, right? Like, if it's about like regaining the movement, like there's no movement at all. Like how can it ever start? It's just like frozen hard. Kat gets no breaks because she sucks, and for whatever reason you defend the character. If everyone else thinks she's an ass, then she's an ass. Well, I don't. I think it's an argument that people have, but you can still look at like her actions, objectively, and say, like, are her actions worse than other people? I think George. I mean, I do think it's a little bit of George's fault that he had, he had that John 2 chapter so early, and it's so cartoonish. Her actions in that chapter are so cartoonish and over the top that you kind of are just like are gonna hate her from as this like very early impression of her. Had he not gone with such an irrationally cartoonish chapter where she's just off the wall, like who would do that? Who would do that? I just did a going over John 2, by the way. Is that one? Did I post that one already? Or is it on I mean, I did it. I'm not sure if it's posted. What was my last? Yeah, I haven't posted that one on the main channel yet. It might be on Patreon. But John 2 is so over the top. Like really, like realistically, would even Cersei Lannister like say to some random person like, you know, it should have been you? I don't even know. Like it's like so cartoonishly mean, and it doesn't really even make sense. Like, what do you mean it should have been me? I wasn't climbing with him. Had we both been climbing together, maybe that statement would make sense, but it doesn't. You know, like I don't like to climb. I don't get it. Like it should have been you. But you know, so we get this one ridiculous chapter that really like colors people on Cat, and it's like you can have 3 books of Cat chapters after that, and it doesn't matter, you know. Cersei would never do that. She would just murder them. Well, the thing is Jaime specifically says that Cersei wouldn't murder children. And so there's the big question on it. I understand that she's accused of killing Robert's bastards, but we don't really have any proof of that. So it's hard to say, like, about Cersei. I mean, certainly with a situation with, like, you know, Malaria Heatherspoon, you're like, oh no, she would totally be crazy. But, you know, so, but yeah. But we find out after the parallels end. The thing is that all the characters are paralleled to each other. So, yeah, Cat and Cersei are paralleled, but Cersei and Daenerys are paralleled. Cersei and Arya are paralleled. Cersei and Jon are paralleled at different times. And, you know, like you can go through chapters and be like, oh, right, there's a parallel there. Right. Oh, yeah. You know? Like Cersei is burning the Tower of the Hand, you know, in the same, you know, at the same time that Jon is watching the burning of Mance Rayder, Rattleshirt, you know. And so, like, these two characters are sitting there watching the flames. So you've got this parallel. Or like Cersei gets her haircut to strip her of her femininity, the same way that Arya got her haircut to strip her of her femininity, the same way that Daenerys had her hair burned off to strip her of her femininity. You know, so they're all paralleled. Everybody's paralleled. I swear it makes sense for Kat to have said this in her mind. She thinks that Jon is Ned's son. But I don't get it. Like she prayed for Bran to stay with her. And then the prayer was fulfilled and he fell and he got to stay with her. But that has nothing to do with Jon. There's not like, there's no, like, it should have been you. It should have been me. How? Like, how did you make a prayer regarding me? Because she didn't. She made no prayer regarding John. John doesn't like to climb. He's not climbing with Bran. Like the line doesn't really make any sense at all. And we all ignore it because it's just so brutal that you're like, oh, brutal line, oh, zinger. And then it's like it's one of those sandwich thoughts, you know. You're like you're eating the ham sandwich in the fridge. You know, this is a reference to Hitchcock. He talks about the ham sandwich. Like when you watch a movie and you're like, that's incredible, and then you go home and you're eating a ham sandwich and you're like, wait a minute, like it's one of those lines where you're like, oh, brutal, total burn, and then later you're like, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense at all. It should have been you. That line's stupid. It should have been you. I mean, this is the thing, is Kat's just in grief. That's the only explanation that you can have, is that like she's insane because she's in grief. She's in massive grief. Can we really blame her for anything? Nothing makes sense. She's being super mean, but she's in grief. Her kid is in a coma and got paralyzed from the waist down. That's, have you been in that situation? Like all these people that are like, oh, she was so mean to John. You're like, she had a fucking bad day. Like, let her have a bad day. It's just her saying, I wish it was you. Oh, because of the should? I understand that, like, there's the weird, should have. I'm trying to think, like, if there's a use of should have, like, in that, like, I wanted to have been like that. I don't know. I don't see, I mean, just in a quick scan, I don't see any should haves, like, that are like not literally how we use should haves. John Cersei parallel with the sticky princes. I'm like trying to remember if there's a. I guess so. I mean, you're right. I mean, in the sense that, like, the parallel opposite, like John specifically does not pull out of Ygritte, while, like, Cersei specifically does not have Robert ejaculate inside her and consumes his semen in order to, like, make sure that she's not pregnant. So yeah, the two, all right, let's see this. This is my last one. Going over series is TBAP. This is good. Is this To Pimp a Butterfly? I'm trying to remember. Is that it? To Pimp a Butterfly? I'm not sure what that means. But thank you. I guess it's a thank you. Cat sucks butt. I'm just saying, man, she never brought a little boy to she never brought a little boy to an execution, She never did that. But what are we gonna do? Thank you all for being with me. I'm gonna head to bed and preserve my voice a little bit. I've been trying to get over stuff for a week. Carmine, thank you very much for being here as well. Thank you, Will. Will was with us here earlier. I guess Carmine, if you're not doing your laundry, I'm just saying thanks, and I'll.
I'm right here. I'm like, bro, what the fuck? I'm right here. we got to record tomorrow, by the way. There's some things I want to talk about. We got to record, do something.
Yeah. Oh, this is funny. I thought you said she eats the semen to get pregnant. Quit flip flopping. Sorry for being an ass. Oh no. You're not being an ass. We're the cat. It's an interesting things about cat. I didn't get to I understand. A lot of people got the problems with cat. It's a weird chapter, John too. Should have been you. It just doesn't fucking make any sense. All right. Thank you, everyone. I will see you next time.